Me knowing Indigenous meanings and names for things that sound that surround me is just like when I travel abroad and learn foreign languages. You get to learn the subtlety and you get to learn that history as well that the words entail. They help you to understand more about a place and the people that have inhabited the land for thousands of years. Des Crump is an Indigenous language expert who holds roles at both the University of Queensland and the State Archives. He told the ABC's Rob Bergen that while many people know Maroochydore means a place of the black swan, the word has morphed significantly through the decades.
The word was, in traditional times, was pronounced Murul Kutchi, Murul referring to the black swan or red bill, because Murul is the nose, Kutchi is red, and then Da being the place of. So Maroochydore has been anglicised from Murul Kutchi Da. What tends to happen in some places is, whilst it was great that they've named the traditional name, sometimes they'll anglicise it. And at one stage, even back in as early as the 1850s, when Thomas Mitchell was a Surveyor General for all of New South Wales, which also took in Moreton Bay and parts of Queensland back then, he had a policy where if there was a local Aboriginal name, it should be used. And he had three conditions: if it was something that was easy to pronounce, if it was accurate and could be, I guess, authenticated or validated by the local people. And then the third condition was, which went along with the pronunciation, if it was melodic, so that it actually flowed. And so there's been some examples, like, for example, I live in Ipswich, and the original suburb down here was called Bundabar, after the stone axes and the axe grinding grooves in the creek, but that didn't flow so well. So somebody about 1919, 1920 decided by changing the N to an M, that would make it flow a lot better. So there's a few examples of that happening.
It's interesting. It's quite arbitrary, isn't it, depending on your listening ear?
Yeah, and that's the other thing, depending on who's written it down, how they've heard it. For example, like Karoi, another well-known place on the sunny coast, it's actually from Kurul, which means the grey forest possum, and so obviously they've heard that or sound with more of an oi sound, so that's how they've written it down. Yeah.
Another one that's interested me is near Nambour we have Kulangor, and in Brisbane you've got Kalanga and Kalinga. Are they all similar words?
Certainly Kalanga is, yeah, but Kalinga, I was asked to do some research on that in my previous role at the State Library, because they were wanting to reclaim those old names for the suburbs, and the history for that one goes right back to Meston, and we've got some of his materials at the archives where he's taken a word from down south, which means beautiful place, and normally that Kalinga would be pronounced Kalinna. So very similar to Kalanga in that. And it's from one of the Sydney region, probably Darug or Darawal language, and it refers to a beautiful place. When the park was originally set up, that's how they described it. And NG in Aboriginal languages is one sound, which we don't have in English. So NG, the closest we have is sing or singer, the little NG part in the middle where it's one word. But in English languages, we tend to separate that N and the G, and so that's how Kalinga and Kalanga, when really it was Galanar and Galani.
Oh, so do they both mean derivatives of a beautiful place?
Well, Galan means good in or both Turrbal, the northern Brisbane languages, but also Kabi, and it's so it was meant to refer to a good place or probably for settlement and that, yeah.
We had a little bit of a chat before we came on air about names for dingoes. And interesting, I think news reports now refer to them on Gari as Wangari. And I know there's the football team up here on Bribie Island called the Warragals. So some of the animal names change from place to place too.
Yeah. So sometimes so, for example, Warragal is really another imported word from New South Wales, and it refers to dingo or wild dog. But yeah, we have a different word altogether up here in on the sunny coast. Yeah, watta for a wild dog, and there's also another word for wild dog as well, kurum, but that may be again an imported word, and which sometimes happens. Like sometimes they'll use a word where they become familiar with it, and so that's how our languages sort of get used in different parts of the country. So a classic example is Yarraman, which is used on the Sunshine Coast all the way through to Cape York, and it's the word for horse, but the original source from it is again down in Sydney with when the Gadigal people first saw a horse, they noticed the big white teeth. So yada or yara means teeth, and man, something belonging to that white man. So yadaman became a word that was passed on to next door neighbours. When they first saw a horse, they asked their neighbours, "Well, what do you call that?" And some places, like in my language out in Gamilaroi in Western New South Wales, and a couple of other Western Queensland, Western New South Wales places, they will have an old word for it, but generally most of them will use Yarraman or different variation of it. Yarraman, I've heard up on Palm Island, Yarraman, Yarraman, the same word, just a different emphasis or stress on the different syllables, yeah.
You wanted to talk today about sport. What about the different names for sports?
Yeah, well, there's one general word for play, and that means like play, whether it's a game or it even means if you're playing with a little child and trying to amuse them. And so the word for play is buatin, but if you were running, it's bidlitin. So it has a similar ending. So another one, like we were talking about the football team up here. So if you were kicking something like a football, the word for kick is naraman. But then if you were trying to catch the ball after it's been kicked, dumu.
What about throwing a ball?
Throwing a ball is dingu. And then if you were trying to hit a ball, that would be bunbamin. So lots of different words. And then if you were jumping, that would be warai.
And of course, Australian rules is said to derive from a particular type of Indigenous sport. Do that have official names for different games that used to be played?
So on one of the radio or the TV shows, there's a panel type show called Marnguk, and that was the Victorian Aboriginal name for the game, similar to Aussie rules that they say it evolved from, and it was played with a possum skin ball that was kicked towards the goal, like we do today in AFL. There are some games from Queensland. There was a great project done by one of the lecturers at QUT where he looked at the different types of games that were played right across Australia, and he later worked with the Australian Sports Commission, and they bundled up into a great resource kit for schools called Yurni, which means to play or sport in my language, Gamilaroi. And so we had a range of bat and ball games. Most of them were a little bit different to how we see games today. Some of them had a learning part to it where they were trying to learn or teach the young ones how to throw a spear, and so they'd use a toy spear, and they'd make a ball out of rolled up grass, or even using skin, and so that it could bounce a little bit more. And they'd be rolled down between two lines of people or two lines of children, and they try and hit the ball to see who could hit it the most or hit it first as it rolled through.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'd love to hear about more sports like that.
Yeah, well, there's quite a few schools in particularly with the around NAIDOC. There's Indigenous sports days where they bring out those traditional games, and it's certainly a great resource and certainly recommended for any schools on the sunny coast. And they have got a bit of the story behind the game, where it was played, how it was played, and then also using some of the I guess modern day equipment. So it's a bit hard to find spears and play these games in a nice workplace health and safety way. So
you can't get possum skin anywhere these days.
No.
Is there any evidence to suggest that different clans would gather together for sporting competition days? You know, like the ancient Greeks had the Olympics. Was there similar sporting conquests, taking place?
Well, there were certainly games in that associated with the Bonnier Festival. So certainly on the sunny coast, there was on the Blackwall Ranges there's the Bonnier Festivals there, and the one most people know of over in the Bonnier Mountains at Dalby. And there would be spear throwing and climbing and other types of competitions. There's more just sort of a social interaction rather than a competitive nature. Yeah.
First Nations language expert Des Crump speaking with Rob Bergen.